Greetings and thank you for joining us for today's webinar addressing difficulties with voice, speech, and activities of daily living in Parkinson's disease. My name is Laura Gousset. I am an LSVT BIG certified clinician and Chief Clinical Officer of LSVT BIG, and I'll be moderating today's session along with our presenters Angela Halpern, speech-language pathologist and LSVT Loud certified clinician, along with Bernie Kozer, an occupational therapist who is an LSVT BIG faculty member. So before we go any further, we would like to acknowledge the funding support that has made LSVT BIG and LSVT Loud possible in what they are today. On the bottom of the slide, you can see that we have received funding support over the years from the National Institutes of Health, the Michael J. Fox Foundation, the Parkinson's Alliance, and the Davis Finney Foundation. So in case you haven't joined us for one of our webinars in the past, we'd like to go over some logistics. And after that, I'm going to turn it over to Bernie and Angela, who will be presenting today, giving you a general overview of the LSVT Loud and LSVT BIG programs, and then really digging into the heart of this webinar, which is a discussion of the changes associated with Parkinson's disease related to voice, speech, and activities of daily living. And at the end of this webinar, we hope to leave some time to address your questions that you might have pertaining to LSVT BIG or LSVT Loud and this topic. So in terms of logistics, right now everyone in the audience is automatically muted so that there's no background environment from the various environments from which you might be joining us. At the end of the webinar, you'll have some opportunities to ask your questions live of the presenters today. There are a couple of ways that you can ask questions, and here's a general overview of how to do that. You'll see on the right side of your screen a control panel, and towards the bottom of the control panel there's a section called Questions. If you click on the little plus sign, that will open it up and you'll be able to type in your question. Once you send that question to us, we'll see that you've submitted the question, and at the end of the webinar either Angela or Bernie or myself will be able to answer that question live to the group, and you'll be anonymous. Your name will not be associated with that question at all. The other way that you can ask a question at the end of the webinar is to raise your hand. And you'll also see on your control panel a little hand icon. If you click on that, we'll see that your hand has been raised, and we will unmute your microphone. We'll call out your first and last name so that you know your microphone has been unmuted, and then you can ask your question aloud to the presenters and we'll provide you an answer out loud. The third way of asking questions, in case we run out of time or you think of a question after the webinar, please email us at info@lsvtglobal.com, and your question will be directed to one of our clinical experts who would be happy to answer your question. So I would like to introduce Angela and Bernie a little bit further at this time. Angela is a speech-language pathologist and has worked for many years with persons with Parkinson's disease. She has been instrumental in assisting with much of the research on LSVT Loud, and now she serves as the Chief Clinical Officer of LSVT Loud for LSVT Global. Bernie Kozer is an occupational therapist with many, many years of experience, and in the more recent years, she's really specialized in delivery of care in the home care environment. She's an LSVT BIG certified clinician and is also one of our LSVT BIG training and certification workshop faculty members. So we welcome both Angela and Bernie today. They both have much experience that they are very happy to share with you. We do disclose to you that we receive lecture and travel honorarium from LSVT Global, and we have a non-financial relationship of a preference for LSVT Loud and LSVT BIG as treatment techniques. Furthermore, Angela and myself are employees of LSVT Global. So here are the objectives of today's presentation. We'd like to briefly explain the motivation behind the LSVT Loud and LSVT Big programs. And then we're going to launch into a discussion of the difficulties with voice, speech, and activities of daily living associated with Parkinson's disease, and then discuss common treatment approaches, including LSVT Loud and LSVT Big. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Angela, who's going to join you in today's webinar.
So I think Bernie's doing this first one. Hi, everyone. This is Bernie Koser. And as we spoke about earlier, we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking with you about some of the significant effects of Parkinson's disease on activities of daily living, and we'll talk about that in a moment, and how LSVT Big and LSVT Loud are treatment approaches that are so unique in addressing some of these issues. So I think the term ADLs is not as common in all sectors. It is to us as healthcare providers, but it primarily means functions such as dressing, bathing, all the way up to community activities and being able to do things in your own home as safely and independently as possible. So it's a very broad-ranging term. So ADL issues can include things like problems in moving around in the home, being able to complete these home tasks and self-care tasks. Someone with Parkinson's disease frequently has these issues. Many of our individuals with Parkinson's disease have decreased safety and are experiencing more falls with the progression of the disease, and have some bathing and dressing and community reintegration problems as a result of that. There's also changes in fine coordination that might affect your handwriting, your ability to button buttons, your ability to pick up your medications and be able to manage your medications. And in general, there is a slowness and a decreased efficiency for dressing and meal prep. So all of these things are going to result in difficulties that will actually affect things like your quality of life, a person's ability to be as independent as possible within their home or in their community. Safety, as I mentioned about falls, that's frequently the first time that we end up seeing a patient who has Parkinson's disease. The ability to be able to manage everyday activities that you might have taken for granted before, but they have become more significant. Now you require more assistance with childcare, working, being able to travel in the community and being able to get to work, ability to live alone, and also just in general an ability to participate in life as before the diagnosis or before the progression of the disease. So next slide, please. Therapy is one of those prescription items that a physician will frequently provide to a person with Parkinson's. And people with Parkinson's do require this therapy to address issues. So we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the treatment options that they might have. Frequently, a physician will prescribe the treatment protocol or the treatment therapy at the time that there's actually issues. Some physicians will prescribe this right at diagnosis. We did want to talk a little bit about a moment to talk about current or traditional therapy for Parkinson's disease before we spend some time talking about LSVT Big and LSVT Loud. So we do recognize that a therapy with LSVT Big and LSVT Loud is extremely different and unique from other traditional therapy approaches. Traditionally, when you're treating a complex neurodegenerative disease such as Parkinson's disease, therapists will do an examination. They'll do an assessment to identify specific impairments such as a weakness, a difficulty with your voice, articulation, respiration, and speech issues. They'll look at deconditioning, incoordination, posture changes, walking and balance changes, range of motion changes, and so on. So you're looking at core type of issues for each person. The treatment plan is then based on these findings, and portions of the treatment time are kind of allocated to treating each of these impairments or disabilities. So you're already seeing how things are kind of fractionated potentially at the start. And you're looking at a lot of different things, but not very cohesively. Treatment intensity might typically be 1 to 2 times a week, and sometimes it can be up to 3 times a week. And much of the treatment is very compensatory focused, such as providing or teaching strategies for manipulating the environment, training with use of an assistive device such as a walker or cane, adaptive aids like a sock aid or a reacher, things like that. So traditionally, treatment of sensory impairment in Parkinson's disease has really not been a major part of the therapy plan, and so there was really not much expectation for lasting improvement. Again, I'm talking about in the past and in traditional treatment and therapy approaches. Lastly, traditionally, people with early Parkinson's disease have not been referred to physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech. And if they were not necessarily provided with intensive treatment. They were provided with some of the plans of care that we were just talking about. Next slide, please. So some of those suggested compensatory strategies that we had been talking about before might include, these are traditional approaches that we might have used with a person with Parkinson's disease. We would teach about trying to minimize the distraction, trying to avoid that multitasking and doing many things at once, trying to restrict the environment in that way. Another thing that we might have suggested, or we do suggest in more traditional therapies, is to use external cues such as lines on the floor, or even some of the laser lights, things like that, to initiate and maintain movement during activities as a compensatory cue. We might also have suggested things like taking an activity, splitting it up into components, working on each component in a sequential way in order to attain, ultimately the whole task, and being able to kind of create some sort of a new strategy that way by splitting things up. And also, we might have instructed in manipulating the environment. So for voice and speech, that would show up as educating people to turn off their TV or radio in order to minimize those distractions, or teaching our patients to sit face-to-face with your communication partner very closely, and also planning phone calls for times a day when you know that you won't be fatigued. So next slide, please. But again, there's the practicality or the utility of these compensatory strategies is not always there. Fact is, life happens and it's full of distractions. It's very, very difficult to minimize multitasking in the course of a busy day. A person with Parkinson's who has children, who has a job, who has a lot of competing distractions, who has to be able to attend to many different things. Minimizing that multitasking is not a very useful strategy. Also, you can't always take those external cues. You can't take the laser lights necessarily wherever you go. You can't manipulate the environment to make sure that you'll have the right flooring in order to be able to propel yourself to move easily. That's very difficult. It isn't easy to take adaptive devices with you either, not into every situation, and it is not always practical either to use them based on some of the issues that happen with Parkinson's disease as far as the start hesitation. You really cannot always control the environment. You can't set it up as just a perfect setting for these compensatory strategies. And when one of the strategies about splitting a complex movement into a series of simpler movements, it's very difficult to remember several different procedures or sequences. It's sometimes difficult to just remember one, as we all know. Next slide, please. So LSVT big and LSVT loud are truly unique approaches, and as we will explain to you further, they are evidence-based approaches. That is, there's been research that's shown their efficacy and their strength for providing practical strategies as well. But it's also a unique approach for each of our patients with Parkinson's. There's so much of a variation and a skill of a therapist, a physical therapist, occupational therapist, speech and language pathologist working with you to address this protocol is an extremely strong way to approach what your unique issues are for activities of daily living. So LSVT big and LSVT loud do attack the underlying mechanism and in an early Parkinson's disease, so you're actually effecting some changes. And when your disease has progressed, let's say to a more moderate stage, there are compensatory techniques and strategies, again, using the same principles, sensory awareness and understanding and retraining and overlearning. And you're teaching that all alternative route that is going to make a difference in being able to perform activities of daily living. Yes, adaptive aids are introduced for safety, absolutely, but also it's something that is considered in addition to using all of the other compensatory techniques and also using the protocol strategies as well. The focus in LSVT big and loud is on one single target, which is increasing amplitude across the motor systems, across speech systems. And so we're using techniques such as dual task training, looking at two things at once to be able to practically address the ADL issues that we were talking about, to be able to relearn an internal way of being able to manage your environment rather than relying on the environment being manipulated, which is not practical. And it would not break systems down. You're able to practice using that single target of big and loud in order to effect a change in your ability to perform activities of daily living safely and independently. I like this last line too about collaboration. Physical therapists, occupational therapists, and speech and language pathologists truly do work in a team, a very combined team with our patients with LSVT big and LSVT loud with Parkinson's disease. It provides a wonderful framework for that teamwork, and because of that single focus, and it definitely works very well with our patients with Parkinson's disease. So, speaking of teamwork, I'll now turn this over to Angela, who will be talking more in detail about LSVT programs.
Thank you, Bernie, for that great introduction to this topic. So let's dig into what is unique about these LSVT programs. Next slide, please. So the LSVT programs really adhere to these known principles that drive what we call activity-dependent neuroplasticity, or the brain's ability to change. We know that intensive and specific treatments are crucial for making improvements in Parkinson's disease. So when we look at the LSVT loud and LSVT big programs, you're going to see as we walk through them that they're administered in an intensive manner to really challenge the impaired system. You'll also see that the techniques in LSVT loud and LSVT big were developed to be specific to the types of difficulties individuals with Parkinson's disease notice. So what we see in Parkinson's disease is bradykinesia, slowness of movement, hypokinesia, reduced amplitude of movement, and also issues with what we call kinesthetic awareness, or problems with the sensory system of how do my movements feel, how does my voice sound, and we're going to talk about that in a bit more detail. As Bernie introduced to you, LSVT loud and LSVT big programs are evidence-based programs. So if you're going to participate in one of these, you can have the confidence knowing that the treatment that's being delivered to you has been researched and studied. LSVT loud initial studies started to happen over 20 years ago and have been funded for 20 plus years by the National Institutes of Health. Next slide, please. So let's talk about a little bit of what's involved in those treatments. If you're going to receive LSVT big or LSVT loud treatment, it must be delivered by a certified therapist. And what that means is a therapist that has gone to a 2-day training and certification workshop. The reason that is important, as we just mentioned, these treatments are based on research. So we want to ensure that any therapist that's delivering the treatment is doing it as it's been researched over all the years, so that the same protocol that was done in the research is being followed. LSVT big is delivered by physical or occupational therapists. LSVT loud is delivered by speech-language pathologists. Both treatments are one-to-one. So if you do LSVT big, it's going to be one-to-one with a physical or occupational therapist. If you do LSVT loud, one-to-one with a speech therapist. It's important that these are not initially delivered in a group. You really need that one-to-one intervention. There can be some wonderful benefits for group exercise after you finished LSVT loud or LSVT big, but to keep the intensity of treatment, it really needs to be one-to-one. Each of the sessions are 1 hour in length. and they occur 4 consecutive days per week for 4 weeks. So you're doing 16 sessions of treatment in 1 month. Along with those 1-hour sessions, in addition to, you're going to be assigned homework and carryover for 30 days in that month. The homework and carryover doesn't take long to do. It can be done easily and fit into the day, but it's very important to have opportunities to practice what's learned in the treatment room, outside of the treatment room, for long-term maintenance and carryover. Next slide, please. Let's talk next about some of those fundamentals that are involved in LSVT Big and LSVT Loud. We've said that it's research-based, so while it is a standardized specific protocol, the treatments themselves within that standardized protocol are individualized to each person, and that's a very important part of treatment. So there are a certain set of exercises, certain protocol that needs to be followed, but within that, the therapists find out what's important to the patients they're working with and tailor either communication goals or ADL goals or movement goals to be targeted to what that certain person wants to achieve. So within the treatments, we're focusing on the target. We have target, mode, and calibration, but I'm going to start first with target. The target is increasing amplitude. So in some previous slides, we talked about how in Parkinson's disease, there can be decreased amplitude or hypokinesia. So we want to increase that amplitude, whether that's with activities of daily living, so being able to have bigger movements when you're buttoning your shirt, or bigger movements when you're walking down the hall, or more normal loudness voice. All of those include increasing amplitude across the system. The next fundamental is mode. The treatments are delivered intensively and at high effort. You saw in the previous slide that I said it was 4 times a week for 4 weeks, so 1-hour sessions. That's an intensive mode of treatment delivery that is different than some traditional treatment approaches. The reason for that is that we see, based on theories of motor learning and neuroplasticity, that intensive treatment is required to make change. So that intensity is important. You get in, you get it done in a month. And within that, individuals are pushed to high effort levels because we also see that that's important for change. As a speech-language pathologist, sometimes people don't think of speech therapy as exercise. It is exercise as well. And I'll have patients after a session with me say, whoa, I feel like I've been to the gym working out. That's good. Then I know I'm pushing them to those high effort levels. And the third fundamental is calibration. So I'm going to introduce a little of this here, and then we're going to talk about some of these issues with calibration in depth in later slides. So the importance of calibration is we can do all the great motor practice we want in the treatment session. So your physical or occupational therapist can be exercising your limbs, getting bigger movements, speech therapists, getting more normal loudness voice. But if we don't focus on the sensory system, the issues that can happen to how do those movements feel, how does my voice sound, then it's difficult to get those great results that we're seeing in the treatment room to generalize outside of the treatment room, which is the ultimate goal. It's wonderful if we can achieve great things with our patients in our treatment room, but that's not the real world. We want that generalizing to our patients' real world outside of the treatment room. So this is something that really makes LSVT Big and LSVT Loud unique, is this focus on more than just the motor system, but also on the sensory system as well. I'm going to talk in an upcoming slide a bit more about the sensory mismatch, but let's touch on internal cueing. So with Parkinson's disease, we can see that our patients, it can be difficult for them to internalize on their own, independently, the movements required to get to normal amplitude or the voice required to get to normal loudness. So initially, people we work with can do that with our external cues, but the goal is we want our patients to learn to internalize and do that on their own. So we really work on that internal cueing as well. And we try to keep the treatment simple focus, simple on either think big or think loud, so that it can help if individuals are having cognitive problems or problems with multitasking, some of those issues that Bernie introduced earlier, that by that simple focus, that it can help to do a lot of things, but all our patients have to think is think loud or think big. When we think more about calibration and the sensory mismatch, we see there's a mismatch between the online perception of our patient's output and how others perceive it. So my patients will come in and say things to me when I get them to a normal loudness voice of, I feel like I'm shouting, I can't talk like this, it feels too loud. But if I play their voice back for them, they can see, oh, it really is a normal loudness voice. I'm not too loud. And they can hear that the voice that feels normal to them is really too quiet. Likewise, with LSVT big, when therapists get individuals to increase the amplitude of movement, individuals may say things like, I can't move like this. People will think I'm crazy. They feel like they're using extremely big movements. But if they were to look at a video of themselves, they would see, oh, those movements are within normal range. That's the sensory mismatch. There's this mismatch between the perception of how it feels to the individual with Parkinson's versus how others perceive it. We directly target this in treatment to help individuals see the voice that feels too loud is really normal. The movements that feel too big are within normal limits. Next slide, please. So let's look at how this might happen. Pre-treatment, if we start at the bottom of this circle, we're going to see reduced amplitude of motor output. So that might be a quieter voice, smaller movements. And so what that results in as you go up to the right is individuals with Parkinson's might produce those slow movements, softer voice. And because of that sensory mismatch, at the top here we see this problem in the self-perception or awareness, individuals may not recognize that those movements are small or slow or the voice is soft. So then when we think back to, I talked about the cues people give themselves, that self-cue that then is generated is just to continue with the same reduced amplitude of movement because it feels normal to the individual. Next slide, please. But if we look at what the focus is in treatment, starting at the bottom, we're going to increase amplitude of motor output. So increasing to normal loudness, increasing to movements that are within normal limits. And so through the treatments, to the right there, our patients are producing larger movements or louder voice. And then we have to really help individuals, if we look at the top, improve what that self-perception and awareness is of the amount of amplitude required to get that normal loudness voice or to get to normal movement amplitude. And then, but through helping our patients to see this improved ability to then self-cue individually on their own the amount of effort needed to get to normal loudness voice or to normal movement. So that's where you can really see how working on the sensory system is incorporated with the motor components of treatment and is essential for success. If we didn't target that sensory system, what we're working on in the treatment room will not carry over. Next slide, please. Let's talk next about some of the changes that might be seen specifically in voice and speech with individuals with Parkinson's disease. And I'm going to introduce some of these changes with voice and speech, and then I'll turn it back over to Bernie, and she'll talk more specifically about what you might see with movement and how LSVT big could be applied to that. We see that 6 million individuals worldwide are diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. At the time that we first were starting research in voice and speech with Parkinson's disease, it was reported that approximately 89 to 90% of people will notice at some point a problem with their voice and speech. But at the time we were starting the research, the sad reality was it was only reported that about 4% of people were receiving traditional speech therapy. That's a huge discrepancy. If 90% of people are noticing a problem, but only 4% were receiving treatment, we need to do something about that, which was around the time Dr. Ramig started development of LSVT loud. Next slide, please. The reason that people weren't getting treatment was the consensus was that speech treatments didn't work at that time. Speech treatments were focusing on articulation or rate, and they were given at a low dosage. And so there just wasn't evidence in the literature that they were effective, so patients weren't being referred for treatment by their doctors. So there was something that we could do with the development of LSVT loud to change that. Next slide, please. If we look at the speech characteristics that are typically noted in Parkinson's disease, what patients typically report is, or caregivers report, is reduced loudness of the voice, a hoarse voice quality. Sometimes individuals note that their voice has become monotone, so it doesn't have a lot of inflection. Sometimes my patients will tell me my voice feels flat. Some people notice imprecise articulation, so a little slurring, mumbling, and some individuals also notice a vocal tremor. So just like may have a tremor in a hand or a leg, some people notice that at the level of the vocal folds. We actually have individuals who may go to a speech therapist before being diagnosed with Parkinson's because they're noticing changes in their voice and speech, and that might actually be their first symptoms, and then they find out after that those are because of the Parkinson's disease. Next slide, please. A question we receive frequently is, well, don't our voices just change as we get older? How do I know these changes in voice and speech are because of Parkinson's and not just normal aging? It's a great question because, yes, our voices do change as we age. So in all of our research studies, it's been very important that we include individuals of the same age who do not have Parkinson's disease. So for all of the measures that we look at, we can compare the difference of what's Parkinson's versus someone of the same age who doesn't have Parkinson's. In this chart, what you're looking at, individuals with Parkinson's disease are in the yellow. Individuals without Parkinson's disease are in the red. This is looking at changes or loudness levels, so decibels and sound pressure level for loudness. And in the far left, this is when someone's doing ah, and then reading a passage called the rainbow passage. Monologue is just a conversation sample, and then describing a picture. You can see across all the tasks that individuals with Parkinson's disease as a group were quieter than individuals of the same age who didn't have Parkinson's disease. And this came out to be about 2 to 4 decibels less. Decibels are a logarithmic scale, and so when we're looking at this, that was statistically significant when we look at those changes of 2 to 4 decibels. But so what does that acoustic difference mean? So people are 2 to 4 decibels quieter. Next slide, please. When we look at ratings of how effective people feel they are in communication, we see overall that individuals with Parkinson's disease report that they're less likely to participate in conversation or have confidence in their voice. So once again on this chart, individuals with Parkinson's disease are in yellow. Individuals without Parkinson's of a similar age are in red. And you can see that individuals with Parkinson's rated themselves lower of being understood by others, participating in conversation, and starting a conversation. So people do feel this has a functional impact on their communication. Next slide, please. And in fact, we get these types of quotes from our patients. If I have no voice, I have no life. No one listens to me anymore. And it was actually reported by Miller et al. Looking at a wide range of feedback from individuals with Parkinson's, that people with Parkinson's disease live for years frustrated by communication impairment, withdrawal, social isolation, and embarrassment. So the good news is there's something we can do about this. We can help our patients to see that maybe people aren't listening to them because they can't hear them, and they have important things to say. And so we can help our patients get to normal loudness so they can be heard and understood. Next slide, please. We're going to show you a video now of a 59-year-old female. This video was 2.5 years after she was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. She was on the same medications pre and post video, but this is going to give you a sample of her voice and speech before receiving LSVT loud and then after LSVT loud. So the post is going to be after the 4 times a week for 4-week treatment. So let's go ahead and take a look at that video now.
Have you noticed any changes in your speech or your voice that you would associate with Parkinson's?
Yes, I don't speak loud enough a lot of times.
Anything else?
Hoarse.
Anything else?
I stutter, which I never did before.
Do this for me if you would. Take a deep breath and say ah for as long as you can. Good for you. Okay. Would you say Parkinson's disease has caused you to talk less?
Yes.
Because?
Because I stutter and then I can't be heard. If there's noise in the house, like when the kids come over, nobody pays attention to it because they can't hear me. Until I get mad and then yell.
Take a deep breath and say ah for as long as you can. Have you noticed changes in your speech or your voice as a result of the speech therapy?
Oh, yes.
What have you noticed?
I talk louder. I think louder. I'm going to sing with the Sons of the Pioneers one of these days with my voice.
Good for you. That's excellent. What practicing do you do at home?
My ahs, my eyes, and my lows. And I read out the mail out loud.
Excellent. Do you feel like practicing helps?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Do you feel as though people can understand you all of the time now?
Majority of the time, unless it's my husband, and he'll say, well, I can't hear you.
Good for you.
But I think he does that just to be cute.
I think he does too. Has anyone commented that it's easier to understand you now?
Oh, yes, I set some of our friends back when we went to their house and I talked loud. Lou says, what the heck do you? My daughter said, oh, Ma, that's you?
Isn't that good? Don't you feel wonderful?
Oh, yeah, because now she can say, I didn't understand what you said.
Right? No excuses, right?
Yeah,
That's
no
right.
excuses.
All right. So what do you do when you want to be as easy to understand as possible?
Think loud.
All right. So due to differences in audio quality with how you're viewing this, that may have come across choppy for a few of you. If it did, you can always view that video on our website as well. But what I think you could see, whether the video was a little delayed or not, and here, were those changes in voice, louder voice, less hoarseness, less breathiness with the voice and speech. But beyond that, also what we call this spreading of effects. So we've seen, and it's actually been documented with our research, that following just this focus on voice and this voice treatment, we see a spreading of effects to other areas as well, such as improvements in articulation, improvements in respiration. You could see she had more confidence. And we have some really fun preliminary data showing changes in facial expression following the treatment that we're continuing to investigate more. Next slide, please. So what I want you all to do at home now is just in a normal voice, I want you to say, good morning. Okay, now what I would like you to do is I want you to think loud and say, good morning. So what happens with all I said to you was think loud, but what you did automatically, without even having to think about it, is you took a deeper breath. You opened your mouth more. You had better vocal fold adduction and more effort to the articulators, all with that single variable of just think loud. So that's a very simple, efficient way to demonstrate that spreading of effects that I was just talking about. When we work on increased loudness, we see that it's more than just targeting those vocal folds. We can see these changes across the system as well. Next slide, please. We're going to briefly dig into what does an LSVT loud treatment session look like. So the sessions, as I mentioned earlier, are 1 hour in length, and the first half of the session involves the daily exercises. These tasks always stay the same. These are like your weightlifting exercises for your voice, so they help to really build the strength and endurance. Your therapist would have you do sustain as long as you could at a good, healthy, normal loudness. And that usually takes about the first 12 to 15 minutes. We do a minimum of 15 of those. And then, as I mentioned earlier, in Parkinson's disease, there can be, some people notice their voices are monotone. So we do some pitch stretches of a minimum of 15 times, and a minimum of 15 times, going to the lengths of people's ranges, seeing what each person is capable of to help with that inflection in voice and speech. Then we have individuals come up with 10 things that they say every single day, and we practice those several times. And the idea behind those functional speech drills is those phrases become so overlearned that when someone says it outside of the treatment room, it reminds them, oh, I need to use my loud voice, and it's a hook into that louder voice. So typical phrases might be, where are my car keys, or I love you, or some people have, do you want a glass of wine? So whatever someone says daily, then we practice those. The second half of the session is the speech hierarchy. And here our tasks change daily. So we start simple and gradually get more complex to help people with that transition into using the normal loudness voice outside of the treatment room. And this is done through structured reading for 20 to 25 minutes. And I'll tell you a little bit more about this in a future slide. And then throwing in spontaneous, what we call off-the-cuff questions to keep the voice at the same loudness as used during reading. Next slide, please. We're going to do a little demonstration now of the that first daily variable. And the point of this is to help retrain the respiratory laryngeal coordination and get that stronger voice. So this is a sample from our Homework Helper DVD, which is can be helpful for people to use while they're doing treatment with their therapist as homework practice or after they've completed the treatment. So Dr. Fox is going to lead us in the instruction. When you see the green light, you're going to go to do an ah together.
What you're going to do is sit up straight and do what I do. Ah. Be sure to think about feeling the same loudness and effort that you used during your speech treatment sessions. When you're ready, you're going to follow along with the counter on the screen and hold that ah using that good loudness and quality for as long as you can.
So I hope you all had a nice strong ah that you held out during that practice. And if with the video, it would walk you through several of those repetitions and you'd be encouraged to hold it out as long as you could. Next slide, please. The second half of the session, as I mentioned, is the speech hierarchy. And here we start simple and gradually get more complex. So first, individuals are reading at a word phrase level. And then week 2 is sentence level, week 3 is a paragraph level, and week 4 is all conversation. And as I mentioned earlier, it's important that treatment activities are personalized to the individual. So all reading and conversation activities are tailored to the hobbies and the interests of the person. So I've had people I've worked with, we've read about astrophysics and gardening and wine and football, whatever that person is interested in. Next slide, please. We talked about the sensory mismatch that is seen with Parkinson's disease, and so many times in treatment, my patients will say to me when I get them to normal loudness, I can't talk like this, I feel like I'm shouting. And so I'll play their voice back and show them how their voice that feels normal is really soft and the voice that feels too loud is really normal. And we explain it through this diagram. Before you had Parkinson's, your voice was at a normal loudness level. If you wanted to get loud or to a shout, you had to increase your effort 1 to 2 steps. Now with Parkinson's, your voice is down in this soft or perhaps even very soft range. So to get to normal loudness, you have to increase your effort 1 or perhaps even 2 steps. That's why to you, when you're at normal loudness, you feel like you're at loud or a shout. Next slide, please. And then I follow it up with telling people I work with, if you don't feel like you're talking too loud, you're not talking loud enough. All right, I'm now going to turn this over to Bernie so that she can tell you more details about LSVT Big.
Thanks, Angela. So next slide, please. We'd like to start with just a snapshot, kind of a quick look at a typical LSVT Big treatment session. And as you can see, it's more than simply exercise. There's some functional components that we work with that will kind of hook in, just as what Angela was saying earlier about LSVT Loud. LSVT Big also hooks into function using everyday tasks. We'll talk about that in a moment. We focus on hierarchy tasks that are unique to our patients, and also definitely walking big in order to cement in that corrected gait pattern. So next slide, please. We'll begin with talking about the maximal daily exercises. This is truly a snapshot of each of the exercises. As you can see, some are performed in a seated position, some are performed in standing. What you can't see from this snapshot is that some are in a holding kind of a pattern and some are with repetitive movement. So there's actually a progression here even within the 7 maximal daily exercises. And the progression is key, and there's several purposes behind each of the movements, but it's also a progression in order to work us into activities of daily living as much as possible. So let's look at the next slide, please. So there are several purposes to these maximal daily exercises. The first component of the LSVT Big treatment session. First off, it's to learn what's the right amount of effort that a person with Parkinson's needs to produce in order to produce a more normal movement in terms of bigness. Plus, it's to learn and overlearn strategies to override the bradykinesia, which is the slowed movements, and hypokinesia, which is the hesitation at the beginning of movements, that freezing. That is a common issue in Parkinson's disease. Another important purpose of these maximal daily exercises is to train that forced use strategies to overcome those functional changes and restore that ability in order to be able to complete activities of daily living. A third purpose is to drive the activity-dependent neuroplasticity that Angela was speaking of, or that built-in neurological capacity that will result in real brain changes. And a fourth purpose is to improve overall coordination, some of these core abilities such as coordination, balance for activities of daily living, a person's core strength or gross strength for stability in everyday activities, their overall flexibility and ability to move in different planes, and also to improve endurance for activities of daily living. So all LSVT Big treatment sessions will start with the maximal daily exercises, but they definitely don't end there. Next slide, please. So then we do transfer the use of that bigger amplitude that we've been driving using the maximal daily exercises into function. So these exercises do translate, even the movements of the exercise do translate into functional movements that are a problem for people with Parkinson's disease. And that might be something, for example, one of the exercises is a step back and reach. A common link that I've made with my patients is reaching into a closet and then being able to step back without losing your balance. Or for the step to the side exercise, a nice linkage to everyday activities is your ability to be able to maneuver in a crowded room, or be able to maneuver around a table in a restaurant, attempting to get to your seat and pull out the seat and sit back down again. So there are always meaningful links to function, and those are very unique to our patients, and we make that linkage for you during the treatment sessions. Next slide, please. So we do think that our maximal daily exercises are tools to facilitate those improved movements. They're not the end goal of therapy. They're stepping stones for the use of good, big movements in everyday life. And so the improvement of function and activities of daily living are the goals of LSVT Big, not to perfect the ability to perform a maximal daily exercise sequence. Next slide, please. As we know, it is all about function. We started off talking about function and about activities of daily living. That is the overriding goal. Next slide, please. So that people with Parkinson's will be able to use those bigger movements in a more automatic and everyday way, in everyday life and all activities of daily living. And that there would be that carryover and a strategy that could be carried over into everyday use of big movements. So this is an overlearning and learning and overlearning approach, and it targets the problem areas specifically, the ones that have been most reported by our patients with Parkinson's disease. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about how LSVT Big does address the use of bigger movements in ADLs in a very unique way. Next slide. As we've discussed, all sessions do begin with the maximal daily exercises that are on the left side of your slide. There's 7 of them. And these stepping stones might range from the seated and standing, and you're moving from one direction to multiple directions. You're moving from holding patterns to repetitive movements in order to address more appropriately and uniquely a person's ADL changes. Next slide, please. Then moving into functional component tasks, which is the next segment of the LSVT Big session. This is these are activities that are particularly salient and important to our person with Parkinson's disease. It's one of those techniques that makes the link. So these are 5 everyday tasks that we work with our patients or our clients in an individual way. And that's through interview, through observation, through some standardized assessment, to help to arrive at what might be very meaningful activities that will provide that hook into everyday living and provide that constant reminder, that overlearning that Angela was speaking of. And these are always simple. They're never lengthy activities. It might be a one-step activity, such as reaching into a cupboard for a cup or something like that. They're always unique and patient-driven. That is something that's salient and important to our patients. It's not something that the therapist simply chooses for the patient. It has to be personalized to a person's particular abilities and issues, and especially to their environment, to make sure that it's something that's feasible for them to be able to complete in a repetitive way every day. They do not change throughout the course of the LSVT Big treatment cycle, and they're practiced so repetitively that when you count it up, when you add it all up, it's 300 repetitions over a period of 4 weeks, and that's very significant. Definitely there for that overlearning. Next slide, please. So here are some typical examples of functional component tasks, such as being able to manipulate a button, to perhaps be opening a bottle. It could be a bottle of medication. That's something that a lot of our patients have to manage on a day-to-day basis. It could be something like buckling the seatbelt, being able to reach across and buckle. But it is, again, it's not the whole act of getting in and out of the car. It's something very component, very segmented that they would be working on a day-to-day basis. Turning a light on and off, a light switch that might be some difficulty. A lot of my patients, I work in home health, and a lot of our patients have a lot of difficulty with bed mobility and bed transfers, and just being able to pull a sheet on and off or a cover on and off is an excellent component task that they must do daily, and to do it repetitively in a big way is going to really bring home and make that link for our patients with Parkinson's. Next slide, please. So a third functional link, functional or ADL link within each treatment session is known as the hierarchy task training. And as Angela had explained, that is a component also of the LSVT loud. For hierarchy tasks in LSVT big, whether it is one clinician or perhaps a PTOT partnership, 1 to 3 complex sequences or tasks are chosen together in collaboration with our patients in order to see what it is that they need to work on. These are essentially long-term goals or larger goals. They have to have a more of a complexity to them than the functional components had, and they typically have multiple steps to them and are again very salient to the patient, something that's important to them in order for them to be able to achieve this goal is critical. And it's always identified through that discussion and through that assessment process together with the patient and perhaps with their caregiver about a specific goal that they need to accomplish. Next slide, please. So we do have some examples of hierarchy tasks that we might work on with our patients or that we've worked on. We always come up with more. Our patients always come up with more. But there's some great examples here. For example, the process of showering and bathing. If you think about it, it is not just one thing. It's a whole sequence of things that of events and processes and sequences that have to take place in order to complete a shower or a bath safely. There's the physical act of stepping into the shower, but there's also the soaping up, the rinsing off, being able to manage and manipulate the water, being able to towel off, being able to reach back and reach behind you safely and comfortably in order to towel off, and then stepping out safely. Perhaps even directing, again, I'm working in home health, and perhaps even directing someone to assist you in the whole bathing and showering process. So that's one more task or distraction that needs to be able to be managed. So because there are so many levels to each of these tasks, there's a lot of things to work on. And it takes over the period of 4 weeks when we're working with our patients with Parkinson's disease and LSVT big, it takes that length of time in order to work on and attain the goals using a very stepwise approach. Next slide, please. So we wanted to show you a great example of a hierarchy task, and that is bed mobility, which is getting in and out of bed. And so often our patients with Parkinson's disease do have this trouble with sequencing and management and efficiency in getting in and out of bed and in completing all of the steps that are required. So as you can imagine, this would definitely impact things like managing a nighttime continence routine and being able to get to the bathroom timely. So here is a patient of one of our trainers demonstrating a bed mobility of before and after LSVT big.
Ready? Ready? Yep. Yeah. Oh, the immersion? Yeah. When are you going to do it? In April? Yeah. You might have to. Okay. That's pretty good. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, now go ahead and get out of bed. Yeah, then I'll see it. Immersion is great. You know. Go ahead. Ready? Yep.
that's an awesome example of how effective this can be in using that single focus and working on these strategies. But what about fine motor tasks? If you can go to the next slide. We're often asked, does LSVT big work on small movements, such as buttoning or handwriting? And the answer is yes. Yes, indeed, it does. So for the next video, or for the next slide, we'd like to show you that even small movements are too small in people with Parkinson's disease, and that there are strategies that can be used to address things like buttoning. In our next video, we're going to show you Jenny working with a patient with Parkinson's disease who's having trouble with managing his buttons. So she's showing him how LSVT big strategies can make a difference in his efficiency and his independence.
Good. And I want you to just kind of notice as you're watching Bob do his buttons, kind of it's a very slow, small kind of movement that he's using to try and get those buttons through the buttonhole. And this can be a very frustrating thing for a lot of people, Bob. You're not alone in that. Does the top button tend to be one of the hardest ones for you? Okay, okay. Good, you got it, Bo. All right. Do that. Let's do it. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Go again. Wow. Really push it in hard. Nice.
It's about a third of the time.
You're right. You're right. Good job. Now go back in and close it like you're angry with it. Really push it in strong. Nice. How fast is that?
Even quicker.
Even quicker. You're right.
I've never done that quick, and I don't know how long.
Good, good.
So, so that's a great video, and you can see that Bob really made had some success then after using some of the techniques that Jenny showed him. Here's another great handwriting or fine coordination example, but this is an interesting one because it's an example of the positive effects of LSVT big that are actually untrained and uncued. After 4 weeks of LSVT big, the patient who wrote the list of their problem list on the left side rewrote that list for us after 4 weeks on the right side. Notice the big changes in the document, in the way that he's able to document these same words, and to how much more legible, how much larger and clear. So he or she definitely achieved that goal number 9, or that issue number 9 for improving handwriting clarity. So again, these type of fine motor coordination changes are possible with LSVT big, using our activation strategies, our treatment approaches, focus on what's important to our patients out there, and in collaboration with their therapists. So I just want to summarize for you that LSVT big, next slide please, LSVT big is applicable to all stages of Parkinson's disease and can be customized to each patient's needs and treatment settings. I will say that's LSVT big and LSVT loud as well. LSVT big and LSVT loud do increase independence, speed, quality, safety with activities of daily living, with instrumental activities of daily living out in the community, and for our patients as well with difficulty in their speech and voice. And overall, restoring function, improving function, maintaining function are the goals of LSVT big and LSVT loud. With that, I'll turn this back over to Laura.
Thank you, Bernie, and thank you, Angela, for this great content. I'm going to wrap up by giving you some general information on resources, and then we will stay on at the end for 5 or 10 minutes in order to answer the great questions that have been rolling through. So hang tight if you can, because we do want to answer your questions. If you are a person with Parkinson's, someone interested in Parkinson's, Please know that we have a variety of public webinars that are available for free on our website, just like the one that you're viewing today. There are many webinars that we've already done that we've recorded and are available for free on demand. So to find any webinars, whether they're upcoming webinars or previously recorded webinars, go to our website, lsvtglobal.com, click on Patient Resources on the home page, and then click on Webinars, and you'll be able to view all of our webinars or register for upcoming webinars. If you're looking for an LSVT Loud or LSVT Big Certified Clinician, you can also find one on our website. On the home page, there is a button on your left side that says Clinician Directory or Find a Clinician, and you can search specifically for a speech clinician, a physical therapist, or an occupational therapist to receive the treatments that Bernie and Angela were talking about today. We do have LSVT Big and LSVT Loud Homework Helper DVDs that are available for you to purchase, and the purpose of those is to guide you in your daily exercises as you go through treatment and to support you and motivate you after completing LSVT Loud and LSVT Big treatments. More recently, these became available for download or for streaming through Vimeo. So if you search LSVT on Vimeo and look for videos on demand, you'll be able to find those. And those are a great new option to make it more convenient for you. The LSVT Loud Companion software is very convenient for enabling you to do your LSVT Loud home exercises in a very fun and motivating way with real-time feedback as well. This spring, we are launching Loud for Life and Big for Life classes, which are group classes for people that have gone through the LSVT programs so that you can come together with another group of people that have participated in these treatment programs and do your exercises on a regular basis to help maintain your treatment gains. So more to come on those exciting developments in the future. There are some upcoming Parkinson's events that we want you to be aware of because one of them might be coming to your community. And these are free events. They're designed for people with Parkinson's and anyone in the community that's interested in learning more about Parkinson's disease. They're very fun and engaging. So if you're interested, please go on the website. It's either for Partners in Parkinson's, which is sponsored by the Michael J. Fox Foundation, or the Davis Finney Foundation's Victory Summit Symposias. LSVT Global are financial supporters of both of those Parkinson's events, so encourage you to check those out. The Parkinson's Unity Walk is coming up very shortly in Central Park, so if you're in the neighborhood, be sure to come out for a real good time. LSVT Global will have a booth there. And then lastly, the World Parkinson's Congress is a fantastic opportunity not only for people with Parkinson's disease, but also for healthcare providers and anyone interested in Parkinson's disease to learn more at this international congress. There will be a variety of speakers and activities and learning opportunities as well as networking opportunities. And this year it's going to be in Portland, Oregon in September. So be sure to register for those events. So with that, we thank you for joining us for today's webinar. And now we're going to open up for questions. We're going to start with the people that have already written in questions, but if you have a question, remember that you can write it in that question box or raise your hand. And we'll get through as many questions as we can. I know we're a little bit over the hour, so if you need to leave and get back to your busy day, we completely understand that. And if you want to stick around and listen to these questions being answered live by our panelists, we'd encourage you to stick around if you can. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll through and open these up here. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, Angela, this looks like a good question for you. Why does a person sound like they're running out of breath as they struggle to speak, and what can be done?
That is an excellent question. In individuals with Parkinson's disease, we see what we call a decreased coordination between respiration and phonation. So basically what that means is just decreased coordination between breathing and how that air is used and then for speech. So all the activities that we do in our treatment sessions, starting with the work on not only strengthening the vocal folds, strengthening respiratory support, but also helping with that coordination. And we take the skills learned in that, and then we can apply it to reading and conversation. Sometimes in Parkinson's disease, people talk on what we call top of the breath. So when you think back to that incoordination, they may take a breath. Because of the incoordination, let some air out, and then at the end, they're starting to talk on top of the breath. So then it sounds like there's no support. So we do activities that work on helping people to initiate voicing at the top of the breath and efficiently coordinate that system so the voice comes across nice and loud and strong. And there's several techniques that are incorporated into the session to specifically help address that.
All right, thank you, Angela. Here's another one for you. Can Parkinson's also affect your range, that is, a loss of high or low ranges?
Yes, and people will tell me that, I used to be able to sing in church and now it's difficult and I can't hit notes that I was hitting before. And while the intent of the exercises that we do in LSVT Loud are to translate into good speaking voice, so people can be heard and understood in conversation, we certainly do have our patients telling us, wow, I can sing better now. I can hit notes that I wasn't hitting before. I have better support. I can hold out the notes longer, because we are working on training all those systems. And the pitch stretch exercises that we do, once again, are meant to help with inflection and speech, but we are working on stretching that pitch range. So certainly my patients have told me that they've noticed improvements with that.
Okay, great. Bernie, this one is for you. What exercises can help me turn over in bed?
Well, of course, there's the LSVT big maximal daily exercises that you go through. They can actually be adapted to positions in bed or on a mat in order to work on some of the rolling and the trunk rotation that you really need. That's actually one of your best approaches right now if you are struggling with rolling in and out of bed, is to take that component piece and be able to, stretch your arm out big and move and roll back and forth in bed repetitively. That's a good start. But it's always important to have a full treatment approach that's going to address the whole issue with what's going on with your rolling problems, and kind of give you some new strategies at the same time.
All right, thank you. Angela, does DBS negatively affect speech loudness to the point of showing no improvement with LSVT Loud?
Deep brain stimulation can certainly have an adverse effect on voice and speech in some people. And there are many factors that contribute to that. So it's really variable. Some people may not notice changes. Other people might notice some changes. Some people notice significant changes. And a lot of that is due to where the electrodes are implanted, the settings of the stimulators themselves. So there's many factors with that. Most of our research is done on individuals with Parkinson's disease, typical Parkinson's, who haven't had surgeries, but we have done some small case studies with individuals doing LSVT Loud who have gone through deep brain stimulation. The ones we did were of the subthalamic nucleus. And we have seen that people can have positive treatment outcomes utilizing LSVT Loud. There are certain unique characteristics that therapists are trained about when they learn how to do LSVT Loud that they might need to incorporate on top of more shaping with the voice to help the voice to come out better, and other techniques. But yes, we have seen some positive outcomes following LSVT Loud with individuals with DBS.
Thank you. I'll answer the next question. It's regarding difficulty finding a local LSVT certified clinician. The person that wrote in said that they were given names by someone else for an LSVT Loud and an LSVT Big clinician, but could not find them on our website, and I was wondering if they're truly properly trained in LSVT. We're so glad you asked about that, and it is possible that they are, and it's possible that they aren't. Sometimes clinicians choose not to be listed on the directory for some reason, and sometimes their certification has lapsed, so they're no longer listed on our website, and sometimes they unfortunately might say that they're certified to deliver LSVT, but they're not. So the only way that you could really sort through this is to contact our LSVT Global Office by emailing us or calling us and having us verify that that clinician is indeed certified in LSVT loud or LSVT big. Certainly we want to make sure that you get the treatment protocol that you expect, so that you get the results that you expect as based on the research done on LSVT loud and LSVT big. So please do contact us, and we're happy to help you with that. A couple more questions. Bernie, do you know of any exercises that can help with constipation?
Ooh, well, that's a good question. It's not one that I have a lot of expertise to answer. I do know that being more active in general, physically active, is going to improve bowel motility. I would say another important point there would be some hip flexion. I'm just gonna say that that's not my scope of practice to tell you, except in a very general way, that the more active that you are, the more you adhere to some good wellness principles like eating fiber and drinking plenty of water, that you'll be more regular.
Thank you. And I agree with you, Bernie, too. I think the best thing to do is to keep active and also discuss this problem with your doctor. It's a common symptom with Parkinson's disease. It can be very uncomfortable and troubling, but you don't need to suffer with it. Exercise certainly helps, but there's other things that your physician can do to help you with that. And sometimes consultation with a nutritionist or a dietitian can also give you some tips in the right direction. I'll take the next question, and then I think we have one hand raised, and we'll wrap it up for today. The question comes from a listener that says, how do you stop people from falling? Very, very important question, but very difficult to answer with a singular response, because falling, even in people without Parkinson's disease, is very complex. There are many contributing factors, both intrinsic to the person, meaning the disease process itself causing postural instability, medications that you might be taking, orthostatic hypotension, cognition, cognitive decline puts people at risk, in addition to extrinsic factors. And those things are things that, obstacles, things you might trip on or slip on. And so it's really multifactorial. And in order to really determine what the best thing to do in order to help reduce someone's risk of falling or rate of falling is to have an evaluation by a physical therapist and or an occupational therapist who will really do a thorough assessment of a person's balance, consider all of these factors, and then develop a treatment plan to address that. It might be exercises, it might be use of an assistive device. Certainly we feel that LSVT big improves someone's balance and safety with their mobility as well. So hopefully that'll give you some tips in the right direction, but I would definitely urge you to seek out a skilled physical therapist certified in LSVT big to help you with that issue. That's so very important. Okay, I think we have one hand raised, and so I'm going to try and find who that person is, and I think it's Neil Tomita. If you're still on, you've been so patient, so I'm going to unmute your microphone. Neil, you might have to unmute your own microphone on the control panel. Towards the top, you'll see a little gray microphone. If you click on that so it turns green, you'll be able to talk so that we can hear your question. We'll just give you a few seconds here to be able to do that. Okay. And Neil, I'm not hearing you, so I'm going to move on to the next person. Karen Line, I've unmuted your microphone Do you have a question you'd like to ask out loud? Okay. And we'll try one more person here. Saul Rosenbaum, do you have any questions that you'd like to ask out loud? Saul Rosenbaum.
Yes, I am the caregiver for him, and I want to know that in the morning, because I have to get him up and stuff like that, and I see you put the roll, like how to roll him out of bed. You are saying that the more he done for himself, is the better it is?
Well, certainly our goal is to improve a patient's independence with bed mobility, and that can often be achieved through LSVT big by driving their amplitude or their bigness of movement. But we also have to factor in safety as well, and so we never compromise safety for amplitude of movement. And I'm not sure if your loved one has received LSVT big or not, but that would be something that we would certainly work on. Does that make sense?
Yes, because for example, like I will beside him to assist him to get him out of bed, but usually like he won't, to pull him up, take him out, but when I listened to you earlier, is that the more they do things, that's better, because like we put a chair there for him to pull himself out, but somebody's always there with him for safety.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that's certainly a common scenario where supervision is still needed for safety, but that patient gets to the point through LSVT big where physically they can perform the task themselves in a more normal way. Sometimes even just a quick verbal reminder to use their big movements or big effort will enable them to do that, so that you don't have to do any lifting of that patient out of bed or out of the chair. Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Okay, well with that, I think that we're officially out of time for today, and I think we have answered everyone's questions. If you think of any other questions or we didn't get to yours, please email us at info@lsvtglobal.com. We hope that you will join us for our upcoming webinars and give us feedback through the survey that should pop up at the end of this webinar today. We look forward to joining you again, and we wish you all a great remainder of your day. Thank you.